other. Mainstream media. Government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
But Charlotte Iserbyt doesn't like to brag about herself, but she was the head of policy, Department of Education, under Reagan, the #2 position. Her father and grandfather were Skull and Bones. Her father, Bohemian Grove. She is the lady, decades ago, that blew Skull and Bones wide open. The mainstream media denied that anything was even going on up until she leaked Sutton the info. Now, that was not known for a long time who did it because her father was still alive. I want this history, now that it can be talked about, to be discussed first. And she'll tell you, well, read Sutton's book or read Chris Milligan's excellent Fleshing Out Skull and Bones that's more recent, to see their deep research and overall, you know, bringing the info together. But she was a Skull and Bones East Coast family. And, you know, she's got many documents never before seen. My guys were able to see them when they were up there 3 weeks ago. And so she's agreed. We appreciate it because I sent them up there about the Department of Education brainwashing program. And then I knew she had broken this info. We've interviewed her separately, you know, briefly on this issue as part of other interviews. I wanted to get her on today. And, you know, she was telling me during the break, getting her on, well, Alex, you know, the stuff's out there. It's on my website. I know, but not the specifics of the family and how it works. You know, we see films like The Good Shepherd, directed by Robert De Niro with Matt Damon, that the media hailed as very accurate. I don't know if it's accurate from what she's seen. I mean, it's got the guy dressed up as the devil, as a king, and the rituals, and that's reportedly accurate. The New York Observer got some of the devils equal death and all that stuff on video in the outside courtyard of the tomb. But I specifically, you know, wanted her to just get into some of the other areas, like in that film, and in also some of the reports that there's Skull and Bones families, and that sometimes, you know, the wives get inducted in as well. So I wanted to talk to Charlotte about that because this is important historical information. Skull and Bones is one of the most powerful ruling class groups where a whole bunch of presidents, CIA directors, secretaries of state, you name it, come from. And so Charlotte joins us for the next 40 minutes or so. We'll talk about this, and then we'll get to those calls as I promised to. But Charlotte, the author of Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which was now gone out of print, now joins us here today, but you can still read the free digital copy at her website. We'll tell you how to do that as well. She's a great humanitarian. Charlotte, great to have you here with us today.
Good afternoon, Alex, and I hope I can live up to your expectations.
Oh, I'm sure you can. Believe me, I've seen the footage the guy shot of the documents. Now, Charlotte, let's go back to the beginning and start with Antony Sutton. Then we'll get into your family, and you're gracious to talk about this. I know some of it's painful, you know, to go back and remember your father's death when you were caring for him and other things. But let's discuss how you got it to Sutton, why it couldn't be known at the time, what his book on Skull and Bones and the secret establishment covered.
I have been coming to this conclusion ever since I came back from overseas and worked in Soviet affairs, too, in the Department of State. I don't think there ever was a Cold War. I mean, I don't think there ever was a problem between the United States and the Soviet Union. They can call it Cold War because it wasn't hot.
But that's not kooky. That's actually come out in documents.
Well, yeah, I know, and I've always felt that way, but I think...
no, but they love McCarthy. I mean, the Russians have now released the documents. New York Times headline, McCarthy was right. It turned out but they liked him, just interrupting, talking about communist, as long as it was file clerks, so they could have a police state in the name of countering the Soviets and build us into the authoritarian system. But as soon as he said the army is running the communist, boom, it was over for him because he'd found out the truth. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no, that's true. And I think, though, that Sutton, with all of his extraordinary research on, or giving, you know, giving aid to the Soviet Union, I mean, we were making it possible for the development of their country technologically and militarily. Gave them the nukes and then executed the Rosenbergs. Go ahead. But then, also, you know, I ran into the marvelous book, which is really my favorite book, Charlotte's favorite book, she has thousands of books, is by
George Racy Jordan from Major Jordan's diaries. Now, I would say that and Sutton and a few of the other books that your guys took pictures of. That book, too, that really was definitely important in bringing me to the conclusion that there never was a Cold War. They had to bring the phony wall had to come down and all that, and it did, and all of this had been, in secret papers, predicted. All of this was necessary for the merger to take place.
Yeah, the Carnegies wrote about that in the 20s.
Absolutely. So anyway, so Sutton must have called me, and I guess I mentioned to him, because I was staying out at the house. I was taking care of my father in New Jersey, and I think I probably said, have you checked on the order at Yale? And he said, well, yeah, he had, and he was very, very interested. He said, what do you know? And I told him that, my father and grandfather were members of the order. I have to point out that my father really had absolutely less than zero to do with the policies of the order, which have brought us to where we are right now. My dad was a great constitutionalist, wonderful man. I can't think of, I could go on forever talking about him, and he was beloved by everybody, from the garbage man to the head, the top people in the corporations and in Europe.
And that's why it was his daughter that blew him wide open.
And, well, he did not know that. But
no, I know, but it just shows the bloodline. Go ahead.
Yeah, but what he did do, I'll mention this first, because I was at that point working with Phyllis Schlafly putting together the book Child Abuse in the Classroom. That's quite a marvelous book, folks, and it is at Samuel's website. It's a free, you can read it. So it's all the documentation on the hearings we had in the early 80s, which I was instrumental in, on what they're doing to our children, the destruction of our children's morals and values. So anyway, Phyllis and I were talking about putting that book of hers together in order for her to sell it at the Republican convention coming up in, was 84, I guess. And my father was dying of cancer, and we put a little room off of the kitchen for him at home so that, he didn't have to go up and downstairs, and we'd be close to him. And so he had to listen to all this, mouth out of his daughter, Charlotte, and talking on the phone with people like Phyllis. And so he heard all about globalism. I was talking about globalism and all these dreadful programs in the schools. And so about a week before he died, he looked at me and he said, Char, if I had longer, I'd help you. So really something remarkable happened there. I think he was, Phyllis and I or myself or whatever, we brainwashed. We deprogrammed him. But anyway, it was during that period that Sutton found out about, the books arrived in the mail one day, 3 of them, the membership list. And so I was taking care of my father's mail, and I opened them up, and I looked at them, and let me point out at this point, I knew nothing about Skull and Bones. I knew nothing about what they did. All I knew was we had a great big grandfather clock that my father had always said, don't ever let it wind down. Well, my son Sam says he knows why that is, because evidently there's some sort of mysterious reason for that, because I guess they're never meant to wind down, huh? So Dad always was fussy about that. Do not let that clock wind down. You've got to keep it going. So anyway, that's all I knew, and a few other things I can tell you about, too. But I wasn't... so when I saw the list, I thought, well, I've never seen these before. So there were 3 books that were the present membership, the past membership is something at all members from the beginning, all mixed up, huh? And so I took them into my father, and he said, oh, gee, he said, I've never seen that before. He said, they never put the list in books. Okay, well, so I let him look at it, and then I took them back, and then I talked to Tony Sutton, and he said, Charlotte, would you lend them to me? And I said, well, I don't know, why not, as long as you get them back to me as soon as you can. I said, I feel a little bit like a traitor, but I feel it's important for you to have them. So anyway, I sent them to him, and he called me couple of days later, and he said, this is the most remarkable experience I've ever had. He said, I've been trying to figure this thing out for a long time, and you're not kidding. He had with all his volumes that he was doing for Hoover. And he said, I just have never really been able to, pinpoint where does this support for working with the Soviets and bringing this country down come from.
Stay there. We're going to be right back. Charlotte Iserbyt. They must destroy the republic to build their system.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. Are we going to do what they say can't be done? We've got a long way to go.
Aaron Dykes, during the break, ran in and said, yeah, I was reading Sutton's book, and then I looked at it online. You've got the Brown Brother Harriman's building, which also funded Hitler. And here in the U.S., it's surrounded by all the Russian embassies and government facilities. And that's because the Russians, this was admitted at the time, were funded by the United States during Stalin's time. Now, Hitler was a little different. They funded him, told him he was going to have Western support to invade other countries, then set him up and brought him down. But the Russian system is definitely a staged event up until the 1980s and 90s, probably still staged. But you were getting into Antony Sutton, Charlotte Iserbyt. Once he got the Skull and Bones membership list from you, the official internal list, he said he was blown away. Please continue.
Yeah, well, he just said he went and had copies made, at Kinko's or something, and then he put it all out on the dining room table, and he looked, and he said it was the first time that he understood completely what had happened, and that this was the entity, whatever you want to call it, the organization, the order, the fraternity, the whatever, that was responsible for the direction that our country was moving in, militarily, corporate-wise, and education. He saw it. And so he was thrilled. And actually, I have to give Tony credit for not blowing the whistle. I didn't ask him not to. He just felt that it wasn't right for him to identify me. My dad was, by that time, he was gone. So I had no problem with that. But Tony just felt that it wasn't right, and I appreciated that. So anyway, it was very sad that he passed away, by the way, and I've always wondered about that.
He was a real gentleman. I tried to interview him. I interviewed him once, and then I tried to interview him a few years later, I guess back in '99, and he sent me, it was like 1 week before he died. Because I remember hearing like 2 weeks later he just died, and I got a kind email saying, I appreciate your work, Mr. Jones. I'd love to come on. I'm too ill. And then he dies a week later. That's a classy guy.
Well, I don't even know that he was that ill. I think he was ill. He had something wrong with, that inner ear business.
Yeah.
And that was why I couldn't meet with him way back then. I wanted to meet with him when I was in California. And he couldn't because of that. But he told me, he said, other than that, Charlotte, I'm fine. And so I believe, let's talk, we're really getting into conspiracy stuff here. I don't know why Antony Sutton died. I have no idea. Of course, anybody can die. He could have had a heart attack. But I did talk to someone who was very close to him, and the feeling I got was that it was not, there were definitely questions about Antony Sutton's passing.
I may have talked to him right after he'd been poisoned then, because he said, I'm not feeling well, I can't come on. He was literally, it was weird. It was like that with Gary Webb, who wrote the Dark Alliance series about the CIA drug dealing. He sent me this disc that was all his material and said, you have a website, put it up. And then he called back 6 months later and he said, you never put it up? And I said, this is like in '98 or something. I said, well, I'm not very technical. I'm going to try, and we barely had InfoWars up working well then. And then I called him back. We had put up a lot of it, and he said, I'm not ready to come on yet. This is a few years later. He said, I'm writing the book, though, that's going to blow him out of the water. And he was about to come out with that book when they shot him twice in the head. And then
well, they don't have any problem doing these things, as most of your listeners know.